The morning sun rose over the busy streets of the city, painting everything with a soft golden light. Cars honked, shopkeepers opened their shutters, and the sidewalks buzzed with people rushing to work. In the middle of all this noise and movement sat David in his old yellow taxi. His face looked tired, his shirt collar loose, and his hands gripped the steering wheel as if the world was pressing down on him. It had been a rough week. The rent was late, his phone bill was unpaid, and his teenage son needed money for school supplies. David had been driving longer hours than ever, but somehow it was never enough. Every passenger seemed to tip less these days, and every red light felt longer than the last. As he sat at the edge of the curb waiting for his next fare, he sighed heavily and muttered to himself, "Another long day. Just gotta keep moving." Then, he saw a man waving at him from across the street, tall, well-dressed, holding a leather briefcase. His dark skin glistened faintly in the morning light, and his confident walk suggested he was headed to an important meeting. He crossed quickly and reached for the taxi door. "Good morning," the man said politely, opening the back door. His voice was calm and smooth, but something inside David hesitated. He looked at the man, then glanced at the clock on his dashboard. He wasn't really late for anything, but a voice in his head said, "Not this one. It's going to be trouble. Just drive off." David forced a tight smile. "Sorry, buddy. I'm off duty," he lied, tapping the little sign on his dashboard. He quickly shifted the gear, ready to pull away. The man paused, surprised for a moment, but his expression stayed calm. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just nodded slowly, closed the door gently, and stepped back from the taxi. "Have a good day," the man said, his tone still polite but distant. David drove off quickly, but his chest felt oddly heavy. He told himself it was nothing. Just another person, just another ride he didn't want to take. He tried to shake off the thought, turning the radio louder to drown out the silence in his head. But the man's calm face stayed with him. There had been no anger in those eyes, only quiet disappointment. It was almost worse than if the man had shouted. As the morning rush continued, David picked up 3 more passengers in a row, a mother with a crying baby, a businessman glued to his phone, and a student running late for class. But even as he drove them, collected his fare, and smiled automatically, something felt wrong. "Why am I thinking about that guy?" David muttered. "I don't owe him anything. I can choose who I drive, can't I?" But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. Something about the man's calm reaction had unsettled him. No anger, no fight, just quiet dignity. Later that morning, David parked near a small cafe for a quick coffee break. His friend Samir, another taxi driver, was sitting on the hood of his car, sipping tea from a paper cup. "You look like you just swallowed a lemon," Samir joked when he saw David's face. "Yeah, rough morning," David grumbled. "Passengers everywhere, but no good fares. Everyone's in a hurry, nobody tips." Samir shrugged. "That's life, man. You can't control who you pick up. Just take the easy ones and move on." David nodded but didn't feel better. He didn't mention the man from earlier. He didn't know why. Maybe because saying it out loud would make it feel wrong, even to himself. After his break, David went back to driving, but the day didn't improve. Traffic was worse than ever, and a fender bender near the main bridge slowed everything down. His stomach growled with hunger, but he couldn't stop. He needed every fare he could get. By mid-afternoon, his head ached and his patience was thin. A passenger complained about the route he took, another said the air conditioning wasn't cold enough, and a third gave him coins instead of a real tip. When David finally parked near the taxi stand to rest, he leaned back and rubbed his eyes. "I swear," he muttered, "people don't appreciate anything these days." But as he closed his eyes, the image of the well-dressed man from the morning returned. The calm nod, the polite voice, the way he stepped back without a word. For some reason, it bothered David more than the rude passengers, more than the bad traffic, more than his late bills. Why had that simple moment stayed with him all day? He shook his head, telling himself again it was nothing. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, he hadn't treated the man fairly. As evening approached, David finally drove home, his shoulders stiff and his thoughts heavy. His wife noticed his mood as soon as he walked. Long day?" she asked gently. "Yeah," David said shortly, dropping his keys on the table. "Just tired. Bad luck with passengers." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't the whole truth. Something deeper was nagging at him, something he couldn't explain, at least not yet. Across town, the well-dressed man from that morning, Marcus, stepped into a tall glass building. He entered an office on the top floor, shaking hands with several people who greeted him warmly. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Marcus Hayes," one of them said. "We're glad to have you as our new regional manager." Marcus smiled politely, but his mind briefly returned to the taxi driver who refused to take him. He didn't frown, didn't scowl, didn't feel angry, only thoughtful. "Interesting city," Marcus said quietly to himself. "A lot to learn." He turned his attention back to the meeting, but something told him he hadn't seen the last of that driver. The next morning, the city woke up loud and restless. Buses crowded the streets, office workers hurried with coffee cups, and horns echoed from every corner. David was back in his taxi, tired but determined to make better money today. He started early, hoping to beat the rush. But luck didn't seem to be on his side. His first passenger complained about the fare before the ride even started. The second one kept giving directions as if David didn't know his own city. The third passenger slammed the door so hard that David winced. By noon, David's head pounded. He leaned back at a red light and rubbed his temples. "One bad day after another," he muttered. "When will it turn around?" Even when traffic moved, it felt like the whole city was against him. Drivers cut him off. A delivery van nearly scraped his door. A man crossing the street glared at him even though the light was green. David pulled over near a corner shop for a cup of tea. His friend Samir was already there, leaning against his own taxi. "Still grumpy?" Samir asked with a smirk. "Don't start," David said. "Today's even worse than yesterday." Samir shrugged. "Maybe you're just having a streak of bad luck. It happens to everyone." David didn't answer. He didn't feel like telling Samir about the man he refused to pick up the day before. Somehow even thinking about it made him uneasy. The man's calm eyes still bothered him more than angry passengers ever did. After finishing his tea, David climbed back into his taxi and kept driving. The afternoon heat baked the streets, making the steering wheel hot under his hands. He tried to stay focused, but his mind kept wandering. He thought of his bills, his family, and the tired look on his wife's face last night. "Just need to keep working," David told himself. "No one's going to help me. Gotta push through." Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus walked into a tall office building. The reception area gleamed with polished floors and glass walls. Employees greeted him with smiles. Word had spread quickly that he was the new regional manager for the company that owned one of the largest taxi fleets in the city. Marcus kept his smile polite, but his eyes were sharp. He had big plans to improve service standards. He believed every passenger deserved respect, and he intended to make sure the company reflected that. As he settled into his new office, Marcus reviewed driver profiles and performance reports. He paused when one photo caught his eye. David's. The name was listed under several complaints from past passengers. Rude behavior, refused service, poor attitude. Marcus raised an eyebrow. So it wasn't just me, he thought. He didn't feel angry and only curious. He wanted to understand why someone would act this way. Back in his taxi, David got a message on his phone. "Mandatory meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. New regional manager will address all drivers. Attendance required. David groaned aloud. Great. Another boring speech about customer service. When his shift ended late that night, David drove home with an aching back and an empty feeling inside. At dinner, his wife asked how his day went. Same as always, he muttered. Traffic, complaints, no tips. You can't keep living like this, she said softly. You're always angry when you come home. Maybe you need a break. A break? David said, shaking his head. I can't afford a break. I need more rides, not fewer. He didn't mention the meeting. He didn't mention the man from yesterday. He just wanted to sleep and forget about everything. But sleep didn't come easily. Lying in bed, David stared at the ceiling and remembered the calm nod, the polite voice. Have a good day. Why had those simple words stayed with him? Why did it feel like he'd done something wrong? The next morning, the streets were just as crowded, but David didn't start his taxi shift right away. He drove to the company office where the meeting was being held. Dozens of drivers gathered inside a small conference room, chatting about the new boss. I heard he's strict, one driver whispered. They say he's from the corporate office, another said. Hope he doesn't mess with our schedules, someone else grumbled. David sat in the back, arms crossed, not really listening. He just wanted the meeting to end quickly so he could get back to work. Then the room went quiet as the door opened. A tall man in a dark suit stepped inside. His voice was calm, steady, and familiar. Good morning, everyone, the man said. My name is Marcus Hayes. I'm honored to serve as your new regional manager. David froze in his seat. His heart skipped a beat. It was the same man he had refused to take in his taxi yesterday. Marcus looked around the room, his expression friendly but serious. He spoke about improving the company, treating passengers with respect, and making drivers proud of their work. He didn't raise his voice or scold anyone, but his words carried weight. David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. It felt as if Marcus was speaking directly to him, even though he never mentioned his name. At the end of the meeting, Marcus said, I'll be spending time with each of you over the next few weeks. I want to learn what you face out there and how we can make this job better for everyone. David kept his head down, hoping not to be noticed. But Marcus's eyes swept over the room, and for a brief second, they met David's. There was no anger in them, only calm recognition. David's chest tightened. He looked away quickly, pretending to check his phone, but deep inside he knew this wasn't over. The morning after the meeting, David woke up still uneasy. The image of Marcus standing at the front of the room would not leave his mind. He remembered that calm voice, the steady eyes, the way Marcus had spoken about respect as if it was the simplest thing in the world. David tried to shake off the feeling. It's just another manager, he told himself. He probably doesn't even remember me. But deep down, David knew that wasn't true. Marcus had looked straight at him, and in that brief glance, David felt seen, not just as a driver, but as a man who had done something wrong. After breakfast, David grabbed his taxi keys and stepped out into the bright morning air. His wife called after him, Don't forget the electric bill. They sent another notice. I'll handle it, David said quickly, though he had no idea how. His pockets felt lighter than ever, and his mind was heavy with worry. On his way to the taxi stand, David's phone buzzed. It was a message from the company office. Driver David Turner. Please report for a private meeting with Regional Manager Marcus Hayes at 4 p.m. today. David stopped walking. His stomach twisted. Why does he want to see me? He muttered. Does he know? Is this about yesterday? He climbed into his taxi and started his shift, but his mind wasn't on the road. Passengers spoke to him, but he barely answered. A woman asked to stop by a pharmacy, and he missed the turn completely, earning himself an angry look. A businessman tried to pay with cash, and David gave him the wrong change by mistake. All morning, David's thoughts circled around one question. What will Marcus say? At lunch, He sat with Samir again at the roadside cafe. Samir noticed the worried look on his face. "What's wrong with you? You look like you saw a ghost." David forced a laugh. "Nothing. Just tired. Got called in for some meeting later." "Meeting?" Samir raised an eyebrow. "What for?" "New boss wants to talk, I guess." "Ah, probably nothing," Samir said, sipping his tea. "They always give fancy speeches about respect and service. Just nod and agree. You'll be fine." David nodded, but his heart didn't agree. Marcus wasn't just any boss. He was that man. The afternoon passed slowly. David kept glancing at the clock, dreading 4 o'clock. He barely remembered the passengers he picked up. A mother with 2 kids thanked him for driving carefully. Normally, he would feel proud, but today the praise didn't sink in. By 3:30, David parked outside the office building. He sat in his taxi for 10 minutes, staring at the door. "Just go in," he told himself. "Be polite. Maybe he doesn't even bring it up." Finally, he stepped out, straightened his shirt, and walked inside. The receptionist smiled and directed him to Marcus's office. When David entered, Marcus was standing by the window looking out over the city. The afternoon light filled the room, giving it a calm, quiet atmosphere. Marcus turned and smiled slightly. "David Turner," Marcus said warmly. "Thank you for coming." David nodded awkwardly. "Yes, sir." He stood near the door, unsure if he should sit. "Please have a seat," Marcus said, gesturing to a chair. "I just wanted to have a quick chat." David sat down, feeling his palms sweat. He waited for Marcus to mention the taxi incident, but Marcus didn't. Instead, he asked, "How long have you been driving?" "Almost 15 years, David said. "Started when my son was born. Needed steady work." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "It's not easy, is it? Long hours, unpredictable passengers, city traffic wearing you down every day." David looked at him in surprise. You know about that?" "I've talked to a lot of drivers," Marcus said gently. "I know how stressful it can be. That's why I wanted to meet you, not to scold, but to understand." David shifted uncomfortably. He wanted to confess right away, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he said, "It's hard, yeah. People don't always treat you well. Sometimes you just want to skip the trouble." Marcus's eyes rested on him calmly. "Do you think passengers feel the same way? That sometimes they just want to skip the trouble?" David frowned, unsure how to answer. Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Yesterday morning, I tried to get a taxi." David's heart thudded. "Here it comes," Marcus continued, his tone still even. "One driver said he was off duty. Maybe he was, maybe not. But I wondered, did he say that because of me? Or because he was tired? Or because he didn't want to bother?" David swallowed hard. His mouth felt dry. "Sir, I think that was me." Marcus didn't look angry. In fact, he nodded as if he had expected the confession. "Thank you for being honest, David." "I'm sorry," David said quickly. "I shouldn't have done that. I was having a bad morning." Marcus smiled faintly. "We all have bad mornings, but the way we treat people in those moments, that's what defines us." David looked down at his hands. Shame burned his cheeks. He had expected anger, maybe even punishment, but instead, Marcus's voice carried only calm understanding. "I started out poor," Marcus said quietly. "I took buses, cabs, anything I could afford. I know what it feels like when someone treats you like you don't matter. It doesn't feel good, David, and I don't want this company to make anyone feel that way." David nodded slowly. "I understand. I believe you do," Marcus said kindly. "And I'm not here to fire you. I just want you to think about this. Every person you pick up has a story. You don't have to know it, but you should respect it. Can you do that?" David felt a strange sense of relief. "Yes, sir, I can." Marcus smiled and stood up. "Good. That's all I wanted to hear today. Go back to work and show me, not with words, but with how you drive." As David walked out of the office, he felt lighter. Marcus hadn't punished him, but somehow that made David feel even more responsible to change. The next morning, Michael woke up early. His eyes were tired, but his heart was calm. He kept thinking about the words his mother told him over the phone. People can change, but only if you give them a chance to show it. He repeated those words in his head as he dressed in his best suit. Today was an important day. He had to lead his first official meeting as the new regional director of the taxi company. Across town, David woke up with heavy eyes. He had not slept much. The thought of facing Michael at work made his stomach twist. He tried to convince himself it would be fine. Maybe he won't even remember me. He's a big boss now. He has better things to worry about than an old driver like me. But deep inside, David knew Michael would not forget. And he feared what that meant. David left home early, wearing his cleanest shirt. He wanted to look respectable. He even polished his shoes, something he had not done in years. On the way to work, he kept practicing what to say. "I'm sorry for that day. I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated you that way." But each time his voice cracked. The words felt heavy, stuck in his throat. At the company headquarters, employees gathered in the conference room. The room smelled of fresh coffee and polished wood. The air buzzed with curiosity. Everyone wanted to see the new director. Michael arrived right on time, walking with quiet confidence. His warm smile put people at ease, but David, sitting at the far corner, could not meet his eyes. Michael greeted everyone one by one. When his eyes fell on David, he paused for the briefest moment, just long enough for David to feel the ground shift under his feet. But Michael said nothing. He simply nodded politely and moved on. That silence was louder than any words David had expected. The meeting began. Michael spoke clearly, outlining his plans to improve driver welfare, safety, programs, and training sessions. He wanted to create a company where both drivers and passengers felt respected. His voice carried no anger, no pride, just firm resolve. "This company will grow only if we treat each other with dignity," he said. "No matter who steps into your taxi, they should feel safe and valued." Some drivers nodded in agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. David could barely listen. Every sentence felt like it was aimed at him, though Michael never mentioned his name. His hands trembled under the table. When the meeting ended, people crowded around Michael to shake his hand and welcome him. David stayed seated, hoping to slip away unseen. But Michael's voice stopped him. "David, could you stay back for a moment?" Michael asked gently. The room emptied quickly, leaving just the two of them. David's mouth went dry. He stood awkwardly, eyes fixed on the floor. Michael walked closer, his expression calm but unreadable. "I remember you," Michael said softly. "You refused to take me that night." David swallowed hard. His voice cracked. "Sir, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking straight. I had a bad day? No, that's no excuse. I was wrong." Michael looked at him for a long moment. "Do you know how it felt standing there on the curb that night, after a long day just wanting to get home and being told I wasn't worth a ride?" David's shoulders sagged. "I know, and I hate myself for it. I didn't even know who you were. But that doesn't matter. I shouldn't have done it to anyone." For a moment, silence filled the room. The ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than usual. Michael's eyes softened, though his voice stayed steady. "David, I didn't take this job to punish anyone," Michael said. "I took it to make sure things change. This company, these drivers, they can be better. But that starts with honesty." David blinked back tears. "I'll do anything to make it right. I swear, I've been driving for 20 years, but that night was the first time I felt ashamed of who I was." Michael nodded slowly. Good. Shame means you know it was wrong. But I don't want you to just feel bad. I want you to do better, not just with me, with every passenger, with every person. David finally looked up, meeting Michael's eyes. He saw no anger there, only a quiet strength. It made David's chest ache. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not firing me right here." Michael almost smiled. "I believe in second chances. But don't waste it. I'll be watching, not just you, but everyone. The way we treat people reflects who we are." David nodded firmly. "You won't regret this." As Michael walked away, David felt something inside him shift. The fear in his chest was replaced with determination. He would prove himself worthy of the chance he'd just been given. Not because Michael was his boss, but because it was the right thing to do. Outside, the sun was shining. For the first time in years, David felt like maybe, just maybe, he could change. The next morning, David woke earlier than usual. He sat at the kitchen table, staring into his cup of tea as if the steam could give him answers. His wife noticed his quiet mood. "Something on your mind?" she asked gently. David hesitated. "Met the new boss yesterday, Marcus Hayes, and..." David sighed. "He's different. Not angry, not loud, just calm. Makes you feel like he sees right through you." His wife smiled faintly. "Maybe that's a good thing." David nodded slowly, though he wasn't sure what good felt like anymore. When David arrived at the taxi depot later that morning, a buzz of voices filled the air. Several drivers were gathered in the parking lot talking about Marcus's speech from the day before. "He's serious about changing things," one driver said. "Yeah, heard he's checking on drivers personally," another added. "Hope he doesn't ride with me," someone muttered with a laugh. David walked past them without saying anything. He didn't need to add to the rumors. He already knew Marcus meant every word. At 10 o'clock, David's phone buzzed again. "All drivers, second meeting today, attendance required." He groaned, but drove to the office. When he entered the conference room, he found it full of familiar faces. Drivers sat in rows, waiting. The air smelled of coffee and worn-out car seats. Then the door opened, and Marcus walked in wearing the same calm expression. The room went silent. "Good morning," Marcus said warmly. "Thank you all for coming again. I promise I won't keep you long." He spoke about the company's new plans, better support for drivers, improved safety, and higher standards for customer service. His voice was steady, but every word carried weight. "People choose taxis because they need help," Marcus said. "They may be late for work, worried about family, or just tired from life. We are here to serve, not judge." David shifted in his seat. He knew those words were for everyone, but they felt aimed straight at him. Marcus continued, "I'll be meeting each driver over the next few weeks. Sometimes in the office, sometimes on the road. I want to see how things really work out there, and I want passengers to feel proud they chose this company." Murmurs ran through the room. Some drivers looked nervous, others just looked bored. But David sat perfectly still, eyes locked on Marcus. When the meeting ended, Marcus called out gently, "David Turner, can I see you for a moment?" The room went quiet again. A few drivers exchanged looks, curious about why the new boss wanted to speak to David twice in 2 days. David followed Marcus into his office, trying to keep his shoulders steady even though his heart beat faster. "Relax," Marcus said with a small smile. "This isn't trouble." David managed a weak laugh. "Feels like it." Marcus gestured for him to sit. "I want to tell you something. Yesterday, I appreciated your honesty. Not everyone admits when they've made a mistake." David nodded, eyes on the floor. "I felt bad about it. Still do." "That's good," Marcus said simply. "Feeling bad means you care. But now comes the hard part. showing change. Words are easy, actions are not. David looked up, meeting Marcus's calm eyes. "What do you want me to do?" Marcus leaned back. "Treat every passenger like they matter. No excuses, no shortcuts. And when I check in later, I want to see that you've done it. Not for me, for yourself." David swallowed and nodded. "I'll try." "Not try," Marcus corrected gently. "Do." For a moment, silence filled the office. Then Marcus stood, signaling the conversation was over. "You can go now, David. Get back to work." David left the room feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Determination mixed with nervous energy. He didn't want to disappoint Marcus. That afternoon, David drove with a new kind of focus. His first passenger was an elderly woman carrying several grocery bags. Normally, he might have stayed in the car, but this time he jumped out to help her load them into the trunk. "Thank you, young man," she said with a smile. David smiled back, though young wasn't a word he heard often anymore. "No problem, ma'am." The next passenger was a tourist who spoke broken English. Instead of getting impatient, David listened carefully, making sure the man reached his hotel safely. The tourist was so grateful that he tipped more than expected. By evening, David realized something surprising. Being kind didn't just make passengers happier. It made him feel better, too. But even as David worked hard, he couldn't stop thinking about Marcus's words. The calm voice kept echoing in his head. Not try. Do. Late that night, David parked his taxi and sat for a long time, thinking about the last few days. He thought about the moment he refused Marcus a ride, about the polite nod Marcus had given him, about the unexpected kindness in Marcus's office. Why didn't he just yell at me? David wondered. Why didn't he report me? The answer slowly came. To him, Marcus didn't want to punish him. Marcus wanted him to change. The next morning, David walked into the depot with a new energy. He noticed Marcus speaking with a group of drivers near the door. Marcus looked up, saw David, and gave a brief nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't a smile. It wasn't praise. It was simply a reminder. I'm watching. Keep going. David nodded back. No words were needed. Later that day, David picked up a young man rushing to an interview. The man was nervous, checking his watch every minute. Relax, David said, with a calmness that surprised even himself. I'll get you there on time. True to his word, he took the fastest route and even offered encouragement. You'll do great. Just walk in there confident. The man grinned as he got out. Thanks, driver. You're a lifesaver. David watched him go and realized something. Helping people felt good. Maybe Marcus had been right all along. The next morning, Ali woke up earlier than usual. His eyes felt heavy, but his heart was strangely light. For days he had been living under a shadow of fear and guilt, but now things were different. David had given him another chance. Something no one had ever done before. Ali dressed carefully, wearing his cleanest shirt and pressing his trousers twice to make sure there were no wrinkles. He polished his shoes until they shined. As he looked in the mirror, he saw not just a taxi driver, but a man who wanted to make things right. When he reached the company's building, Ali was surprised to see David standing at the entrance. David wasn't dressed like a strict boss today. He wore a simple suit and had a calm smile on his face. Morning, Ali, David greeted warmly. Ali swallowed nervously. Good morning, sir. David shook his head gently. David, just call me David. Today is not about boss and worker. Today is about showing who you are. Ali nodded, still unsure what David had planned. Inside the office, the staff gathered. David stood at the front and addressed everyone. Friends, he said, I want to introduce someone special. This is Ali, one of our city's hard-working taxi drivers. A few days ago, he made a mistake, but he faced it honestly. I believe people deserve second chances, so I've invited Ali to join our transport team for training. The staff clapped politely. Some smiled, others looked surprised. Ali lowered his gaze, feeling his cheeks grow warm. After the meeting, David showed Ali around. He explained how the company valued respect for every passenger, no matter who they were. "You see, Ali," David said kindly, "a driver is not just someone who takes people from one place to another. A driver is a representative of the company and of his own heart." Ali listened carefully, taking mental notes of every word. Later, that afternoon, David took Ali for a drive around the city. They switched seats often so Ali could practice being calm and polite while driving. David pointed out small details: how to greet passengers, how to help with luggage, how to stay patient in traffic. At one red light, David asked quietly, "Ali, why do you think you refused to take me that day?" Ali hesitated. He had thought about this many times. I was tired. I was angry at life. I judged without thinking. I forgot that every passenger is just a person like me." David nodded thoughtfully. "We all make mistakes, Ali. What matters is what we do after we see them." As the day went on, Ali grew more confident. He felt like he was learning not only to be a better driver, but also to be a better man. When they returned to the office, David introduced Ali to a few department heads. "He's going to help us understand how passengers see our company," David explained. "His experience on the streets is valuable." Ali was surprised again. He had expected to be treated like a stranger, maybe even looked down upon. But here he was, being respected for who he was, even after his mistake. Before leaving, David handed Ali an envelope. "This isn't payment," he said. "It's an invitation. Tomorrow evening, there's a dinner with our company's partners. I want you to come as my guest." Ali blinked in shock. "Dinner? With partners? Sir, I don't belong there." David smiled. "You belong wherever you decide to carry yourself with honesty and dignity. That's what matters." That evening, Ali returned home and told his wife everything. She was amazed. "See?" she said, tears in her eyes. "You thought your mistake would end everything. But look, someone believed in you." Ali smiled softly. "Yes, but I need to prove I deserve that belief." The next day, Ali went back to the company to help with vehicle inspections. He worked alongside other drivers, checking tires, cleaning seats, and ensuring everything was in perfect order. The other drivers were friendly and curious. One of them asked, "Is it true you once refused to pick up the boss?" Ali laughed awkwardly. "Yes, but he didn't fire me. He taught me instead." That afternoon, Ali practiced more with David. They drove through busy streets, stopped at crowded markets, and even picked up a few test passengers who worked at the company. Each time, Ali greeted them politely and spoke with respect. The passengers gave feedback, and all of it was positive. David smiled. "You're improving fast, Ali. Keep this up and you'll inspire others." When evening came, Ali dressed in his best clothes for the dinner. His wife adjusted his collar and whispered, "Show them who you really are." Ali arrived at the hotel nervous but determined. The ballroom was bright and full of important people. David welcomed him warmly and introduced him to several guests. To Ali's surprise, no one looked down on him. They listened to his stories about the city, asked questions, and even laughed at his jokes. At one point, a senior manager approached David and said, "This man has heart. We need more people like him in our team." Ali overheard it and felt his chest tighten with pride. He realized this dinner wasn't just about good food or fancy clothes. It was about being given a chance to stand tall among people he once thought were out of his reach. By the end of the night, Ali thanked David sincerely. "You didn't just forgive me. You trusted me. I won't forget this." David patted his shoulder. "Just keep proving it, Ali. The real journey begins now." Ali walked out of the hotel into the cool night air, feeling like a different man. Tomorrow would bring more work, more learning, and maybe more tests, but he was ready. For the first time in years, Ali felt proud of himself. The morning air was fresh, carrying the scent of rain from the night before. Daniel walked into the taxi company office with a calm expression. His steps were steady, but inside his heart beat a little faster. Today was important. He was not coming as just another passenger. He was here as the new manager who would lead this place. Inside the office, Mark sat at his desk, going through old trip records. His eyes were heavy, showing sleepless nights. He had been thinking about that day on the road, the mistake he made when he refused Daniel a ride. He had promised himself to become better, to judge people less and listen more. When the door opened, Mark looked up and froze. Daniel walked in wearing a neat suit, holding a small folder in his hand. For a moment, silence filled the room. Mark stood quickly, unsure whether to smile, apologize again, or hide his face. "Good morning," Daniel said warmly, breaking the silence. His voice carried no anger. "I believe we've met before." Mark swallowed hard. "Yes. I remember. I still regret that day." Daniel nodded slowly. "I appreciate your honesty. But I didn't come to talk about the past. I came to talk about the future." Mark blinked, confused. "The future?" Daniel smiled and opened his folder. "As of today, I've been appointed the manager of this branch. My job is to make sure this company serves people fairly and works smoothly." The words hit Mark like a wave. He had expected many things: anger, complaints, even revenge, but not this. You're my boss?" he asked, voice trembling. "Yes," Daniel said simply. "But more than that, I want to be your teammate. I believe everyone can grow if they're given a chance. Even me. Even you." Mark lowered his eyes. "After what I did, you still want to work with me?" Daniel stepped closer. "Mark, I've faced unfair treatment many times, but I've also learned that people can change. The question is, do you want to?" Mark nodded quickly. "I do. I really do. I'm sorry, Daniel. I was wrong. I judged you without knowing you. I've been thinking about it every day." Daniel's expression softened. "Good, because I have plans for this company. We're going to train every driver to treat every passenger with respect. And I want you to help lead that change." Mark's eyes widened. "Me? Lead?" "You've been driving for years," Daniel said. "You know this job better than anyone. If you're willing, I'd like you to guide the other drivers. Show them what respect looks like." Mark felt something rise in his chest, pride mixed with humility. I'll do it. I won't let you down." Later that week, Daniel held the first meeting with all the drivers. Mark stood at his side, nervous but determined. Daniel spoke to the group with clear, strong words. "This company will be known for fairness," Daniel said. "No passenger will be turned away because of how they look or where they're from. Respect is not optional. It's the heart of this job." Some drivers nodded, some looked unsure, but no one dared argue. Mark stepped forward and shared his own story. He spoke openly about the mistake he had made and how it changed him. His voice shook, but his honesty touched the room. "I was wrong," Mark said. "I misjudged someone who deserved better. I'll never do that again. And I don't want any of us to make the same mistake. We can all do better." The room was quiet. Slowly, the drivers began to clap, not because they were forced to, but because they respected the courage it took to admit the truth. Weeks passed. Daniel worked hard to improve the office, the routes, and the service. Mark trained the drivers with new energy. Together they built a culture of kindness and respect. Complaints dropped. Customers praised the company for its good service. One evening, after a long day, Daniel and Mark sat outside the office drinking tea. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and gold. You know, Mark said, smiling faintly, if you had decided to get revenge on me, I wouldn't have blamed you. Daniel chuckled. Revenge doesn't change people. Giving them a chance does. Mark nodded. You're a better man than me. Daniel shook his head. No. I just believe everyone deserves an opportunity to be better. You proved me right. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Cars passed by, the city buzzing with life. You've changed a lot, Daniel said. I'm proud of you. Mark looked down, embarrassed but happy. Thanks. I never thought I'd say this about a boss, but I'm proud to work with you too. That evening, a taxi pulled up to the curb. A young passenger hesitated at the door, nervous and unsure. Mark walked over, opened the door with a smile, and said, "Come on in. Everyone's welcome here." Daniel watched, smiling quietly. The past mistake had turned into a new beginning, not just for Mark, but for the whole company. And in that moment, under the fading sun, it was clear. Kindness had won.